She kissed me like nothing had changed, but one missing tan line told me everything I needed to know. Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by again. I appreciate you being here. I've got a new chapter of my life to share with you today, so let's dive in. We were all gathered at the airport, standing near the baggage claim area, anxiously waiting for the passengers to start coming through. My brother-in-law Jason was there too, along with his two daughters, sweet little Emma, who's 9, and her younger sister Mia, who just turned 7. They joined my 2 kids, my son Lucas, who's 12, and my daughter Ava, also 9. The 4 of them clutched a huge handmade sign that read in bright colors, "Welcome home, mommies." 2 weeks earlier, my wife Amanda and her sister Lauren had flown out for a beach getaway to Biz, a tropical escape from the freezing cold winters we endure every January up here in Minnesota. It sounded like the perfect break for them, some sunshine and relaxation away from the snow and routine. When the passengers from their flight finally started appearing at the terminal's sliding doors, the kids practically exploded with joy. Their cheers echoed through the area the moment they spotted Amanda and Lauren walking toward us. I'll admit my heart skipped a beat too. Both of them looked incredible, sun-kissed, glowing with happiness and wearing those relaxed vacation smiles. Amanda rushed to hug Lucas and Ava, wrapping them in her arms like she hadn't seen them in months. She showered them with kisses, ruffling their hair and asking them how they'd been. Then she turned to me. I barely had time to say a word before she pulled me in and kissed me, long, slow, and full of the kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a while. I held her tightly, not wanting to let go. "I missed you so much," she whispered close to my ear. Then, with a little smirk, she added, "Just wait until tonight. I'll show you how much I missed you." And that night? Yeah, she kept that promise and then some. After 15 years of marriage, Amanda knows me better than anyone. She knows my quirks, my moods, and yes, the little things that still make my heart race, like tan lines for instance. Once the kids were tucked into bed and the house finally quiet, she turned to me and said, "Go get in bed, babe. I'll be there in a minute." So, I did just that, lying there in the dark, heart thumping with anticipation. A few minutes later, she stepped out of the bathroom, and I swear I had to do a double take. She was wearing a bikini. Not just any bikini either, it was small, tasteful, and confident, the kind that hugged every curve just right. Amanda's always had a gorgeous face, with a smile that could light up the darkest room. But I know she's always been a little hard on herself. She sometimes thinks she's too petite or doesn't measure up, despite how beautiful I, and everyone else, know she is. Having 2 kids had changed her body in ways she never expected, but not all of it was bad. Her figure had filled out in ways that made her feel more womanly, and she was finally starting to own it. That bikini accentuated all of it, the golden glow of her tan, the softness of her shape, and for a moment I forgot everything else in the world. Then, slowly, she stepped to the foot of the bed. Then, slowly, Amanda slipped her thumbs under the sides of her thong and eased it down, revealing the subtle tan lines where the straps had been. That part of her body remained untouched by the sun, still the same pale, creamy shade it had always been. The contrast stirred something deep in me. My heart raced as she casually unfastened the top of her bikini, letting it dangle over her chest for a moment before finally letting it fall to the floor. Her petite figure stood there, completely unveiled, and I felt an overwhelming rush of love and desire. I couldn't stay still. I crawled to the edge of the bed, wrapped my arms around her waist, and gently pulled her toward me. I kissed her everywhere, her hips, her stomach, her chest. My hands moved instinctively, guided by years of knowing her body. She responded with so much warmth and passion, her breathing growing heavier with each passing moment. In just a few minutes she reached her peak, more than once in fact. I didn't rush anything. I just took in her scent, that raw, earthy musk that only reminded me she was finally home. As we lay together in the dim light, catching our breath, she whispered that she had missed me terribly. She said the way I looked at her made her feel adored, and she told me how glad she was to be back. We didn't just make love that night, we reconnected deeply and we stayed up well into the night doing just that. A few days passed and everything seemed normal. One afternoon while she was cleaning out the bathtub, Amanda made a little joke. She laughed and said she had caught herself in the hallway a couple times during the trip, just admiring the view. Then she walked over to me, her eyes gleaming with mischief, and playfully pressed her body against mine. "This is just my way of teasing you," she murmured, grinning. Normally, I would have pulled her closer, pressed myself against her, and gone along with the moment. But this time, something held me back. For some reason I froze. A strange feeling gripped my chest, like a shadow creeping in. It wasn't fear exactly, but something close. I couldn't explain it, but something about the whole moment didn't sit right with me. Sensing my hesitation, Amanda seemed annoyed. She backed up and crossed her arms. "You're like every guy," she said, half joking but clearly a little bitter. "All talk, no action." Then, with a small huff, she turned back to the bathroom and picked up her cleaning gloves, saying she might as well finish scrubbing the tub. And that's when it hit me, just a flash of a detail, something small and seemingly insignificant, but it triggered something deep in my mind. I didn't say anything. I just turned pale and muttered something about needing to go to the garage. I didn't care if she heard or not. I just needed to get out of that room. Once I was alone, sitting on the edge of my workbench in the garage, I felt it wash over me, a gut-wrenching feeling that I couldn't shake. Something was off. That moment in the bathroom, her teasing, her comment, it all suddenly felt foreign, like it didn't belong. That little detail I'd noticed was buried in my subconscious, but it was enough to make me wonder, what really happened while Amanda was away in biz? Did she cross a line? Was she with someone else? I didn't have proof, at least not yet, but something deep inside was screaming that something was wrong. There was one thing I was completely certain about. If Amanda ever even slightly tried to find another man, it wouldn't take her long. She's beautiful, charming, and confident enough to draw attention without even meaning to. But what had really gotten under my skin was the realization that what I saw earlier only made sense if something had actually happened between her and her sister while they were away. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, it added up in a disturbing way. And then came the harder question. What would I do if I confirmed my fears? The answer was immediate, even if it hurt to admit. I'd leave her. No second chances. No drawn-out arguments. Just leave. As heartbreaking as that would be, especially for our kids, Lucas and Ava, I couldn't live with a betrayal like that. But why? Why would she do this to me, to us? Had I failed as a husband? Was I that blind to something missing between us? Those thoughts circled endlessly in my mind that evening, like a storm I couldn't outrun. As strong as my suspicion was, I didn't have a shred of proof. And the worst part? Whatever might have happened took place nearly 3,000 miles away in another country. There was no evidence. No trail. Nothing I could confront her with. If I asked Amanda directly, she'd deny it. I knew that. She's sharp, quick on her feet. And Lauren? Her sister is just as tough. Confronting one of them might just trigger them both to circle the wagons. I'd known enough sisters in my life to know, if one steps out of line, the other either follows or covers it up. Still, the idea wouldn't leave me alone. Maybe Jason, Lauren's husband, had noticed something. Maybe he felt the same pit forming in his gut. Later that evening, I heard Amanda calling out from the back door. "Are you okay? You've been out in the garage for over 2 hours, she said, sounding a little puzzled. I walked back in, doing my best to appear normal. Just got caught up cleaning a few things, I said casually, brushing off her concern. Then it hit me, I couldn't share our bed that night. I didn't want to. I needed space. Time to think. So I told her something small, a believable excuse. I think I caught a bit of a cold this morning. I'll sleep on the couch for a couple of nights just in case. Don't want to pass it to you or the kids." Amanda didn't seem thrilled about it, but she didn't push. "Well, all right," she said, her voice a little flat. "I'll make you some herbal tea before bed. Chamomile should help." Once she went to bed, I was left alone with my thoughts, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket I didn't want. My mind kept spiraling. Why would she do this? What am I supposed to do next? Should I really talk to Jason? Did Lauren ever cheat on him? Then, somewhere in that mess of thoughts, I realized something that gave me a small glimmer of direction. Amanda was social, very social. Over the past few years, she'd made it a habit to keep in touch with just about everyone she met. She had 600 or 700 Facebook friends, maybe more. Her Yahoo email address book was filled with contacts from all over. And that's when the idea formed. If she had stayed in touch with someone from biz, someone she met during her trip, I might find a clue. I was pretty sure Amanda and her sister must have exchanged contact info during their vacation. Email seemed the most likely way they'd stay in touch. But I had this nagging feeling she wouldn't be using the email account we both had access to. We'd always been transparent with each other, even sharing passwords. So, if she was hiding something, it made sense she'd set up a different account entirely. That night, I drifted off to sleep with my mind in overdrive, and somewhere between restless thoughts and exhaustion, a plan began to take shape. The following day at work was a blur. I couldn't focus. I kept making small mistakes, my thoughts constantly circling back to Amanda and what might have really happened in biz. At lunch, I stepped out and scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney for Friday. Just knowing I had that appointment gave me a strange mix of dread and control. Later, I called Jason and asked if he'd meet me for lunch the next day. He sounded surprised. It wasn't something we usually did without a reason, but he agreed. When we sat down, I didn't waste time. I told him what I had noticed and what I feared. At first, he chuckled, thinking maybe I was reading too much into things. But as I laid everything out, my gut feelings, the strange behavior, and Amanda's odd changes, he started to take it seriously. I could see the concern settle into his expression. He finally nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll check. I'll say I'm sick, try to stay home for a few days and see if I notice anything with Lauren." That same afternoon, I left work early, faking a headache. I got home around 3 p.m. and didn't waste any time. I installed keystroke tracking software on the desktop computer we all used at home. It was a desperate move, but I needed answers. I couldn't move forward blind. It took a full week of watching and waiting. And then, there it was. Amanda logged into an unfamiliar email account. The username hit me hard, Beachdreams 1975. The password? She had used our kids' names and birth years. It felt like a punch to the gut. Something so personal, used to hide something so dark. And there it was in plain text, email after email between her and a man named Jake. The messages were intense, emotional, and graphic. She hadn't just slipped up once. This was a full-blown affair. And Lauren? She was just as deep in it. Her emails revealed a relationship with someone named Kyle. The shock hit me like a wave, but I stayed focused. I saved every message and forwarded them to a secure folder. Afterward, I scrubbed the tracking software clean from the system, leaving no trace of what I'd done. Then, from my personal email account, I sent Jason copies of everything I had found. The emails revealed more than I expected. Amanda and Jake had been intimate almost from the first day they landed in Biz. Not only that, but they were planning to meet again, this time in Chicago. Their cover story? The sisters would pretend they were going on a shopping weekend. Jake and Kyle would go to a hockey game, and all four would meet up behind the scenes. I double-checked Amanda's and Lauren's Facebook profiles. Sure enough, both Jake Miller and Kyle Davis had recently popped up as new friends. Both men lived in Illinois. Both were married. It was all there, right in front of me. I had the evidence. I had their names. I had the truth. What I didn't have yet was a plan for what came next. When I confronted Jason again, hoping he'd be ready to face it now, he still struggled. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He said Lauren would never cheat on him, just flat out refused to believe it. He didn't say it out loud, but I could tell he thought I might be wrong, that maybe I was just jealous or paranoid. I didn't push him further. He wasn't ready to face it. But I knew. And now, I had to decide what I was going to do with what I knew. I tried to keep perspective. Despite everything I discovered, Amanda still acted like the same loving wife and mother she had always been. She was sweet with the kids, attentive with me. She kissed me goodnight, laughed at my jokes, and asked how my day went. There were moments, fleeting, confusing moments, when I honestly started questioning myself. Could I have been wrong? Was I just imagining it all? But I wasn't. I had the proof now. And as much as my heart wanted to pretend otherwise, my mind knew better. The hardest part was needing to maintain some level of normal intimacy, keeping up appearances so she wouldn't suspect I was onto her. That day, I gave Jason a call while he was at work. "Hey buddy," I said casually, trying to sound normal. "Are you near your email? Can you check your personal inbox?" He sounded a bit confused but said yes, he could log in. "Did you send me something?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "Just read everything I sent you. Then call me back." It took him half an hour. When he finally called, his voice exploded through the phone. Shock, rage, betrayal all rolled into one. He couldn't believe it. I told him to take a breath, to calm down. I explained that I already had a plan forming, and I needed his help to pull it off. We couldn't let Amanda or Lauren know we were onto them, not yet. We had to be smart about this. Calculated. "I want to hurt her," I admitted. "Not physically, obviously, but emotionally. I want her to feel the same pain she made me feel." Jason didn't even hesitate. "I'm in," he said, voice tight with anger. "Let's do it." I told him to leave a voicemail at home, saying he'd be working late that evening. Then I gave him the address of a quiet old town pub where we could meet for our first planning session. Once we sat down that night over a couple beers, I floated the idea. Embarrassment. Sometimes it's more effective than any confrontation. More lasting than shouting. Jason sat in silence at first, nodding slowly. I brought up something we both knew well, our father-in-law Richard. "Richard adores Amanda and Lauren," I said. "Always has." Jason leaned in. "True. They're his whole world." I nodded. "But do you remember what he told us about their mom?" Jason smirked faintly. That she cheated on him constantly. Exactly, I said. He hates cheaters. And not just a little. I mean, he despises them. He used to say there's nothing lower than a woman who betrays her husband. Jason gave a bitter chuckle. He told me once that he'd never forgive a cheating wife, even if it were his own daughter. That was the spark we needed. We decided that if we played it right, we could use this to expose Amanda and Lauren for what they'd done, right in front of the people who loved them most. Not out of cruelty, but because they deserved to be seen for who they had become. I laid out the plan. We had 2 weeks to keep acting like devoted, loving husbands. No fights. No suspicions. Nothing out of the ordinary. Jason would say he caught a cold, give a reason to work late, act distant. I told him to limit intimacy with Lauren to once a week at most, just to maintain the illusion. I do the same. That night, we raised our glasses not in celebration but in solidarity. We were hurt. But we weren't helpless. That night I came home late, feigning a bad headache. Amanda asked if I was okay, and I played it up just enough to avoid further questions. Despite everything on my mind, the layers of planning, the rising anger, I somehow drifted off to sleep fairly quickly. I didn't need to wait long for the opportunity to set things in motion. A few days later, Amanda casually mentioned that she and Lauren were thinking of doing a quick girls' trip to Chicago. Just a little shopping and bonding time, she said, to unwind after the stress of winter. I lit up with enthusiasm. That sounds like a great idea, I told her, smiling like the supportive husband she believed me to be. I even went a step further and booked a hotel room for her, on our joint credit card. I made sure it was under the name Mr. and Mrs. Miller, with double occupancy, so Amanda would assume she and Lauren were sharing the room. At the same time, Jason offered to cover Lauren's stay, and reserved a second room under Mr. and Mr. Davis, also double occupancy. The setup was flawless. Neither Amanda nor Lauren had any idea that their lovers, Jake and Kyle, would be the ones actually sharing those rooms with them. As far as the girls were concerned, Jason and I were just being extra generous and supportive. The plan was for them to fly out Friday morning, spend the weekend shopping and relaxing, and fly back late Sunday night. The following week, I reached out to Richard Rains, Amanda and Lauren's father, and told him I had a surprise planned for Amanda. I explained that since it was just 2 weeks after our 15th wedding anniversary, I thought a surprise family reunion in Chicago with the kids would be a heartfelt gesture. Richard loved the idea. He even offered to help by booking 3 extra rooms for us all to stay in together. What he didn't know, of course, was that this was no celebration. Jason and I were seething with rage under the surface, pretending to be husbands planning a sweet surprise while quietly preparing to confront the ugliest truth. That Friday morning we dropped the girls off at the airport. They acted like teenagers on the way to prom, laughing at things that weren't funny, whispering to each other with giddy excitement. At the security gate, Jason and I gave them each a kiss on the cheek. Not once did either of them notice that neither of us said, "I love you." As we walked back to the car, Jason kept his eyes on the ground, jaw clenched. I glanced over and saw the same mix of heartbreak and fury on his face that I felt in my own chest. Once we were back in town, I made a call to the private investigator I'd hired a few days earlier. I wanted to make sure everything was in place in Chicago, that we'd have eyes on them from the moment they landed to the moment we showed up. The next morning, we all regrouped at the airport for our flight out. Richard came with us, excited and full of questions about the surprise. On the plane he switched seats with my son Lucas and sat next to me. It didn't take long before he picked up on the tension. "You all right?" he asked, studying my face. "You and Jason look like you're heading to a funeral." I paused for a second, then smiled faintly and said, "Let's just say this weekend might be more revealing than you think." I turned to Richard during the flight and quietly apologized for not telling him sooner. Then, with a heavy heart, I laid it all out. I told him about Amanda and Lauren, about the affair, about the trip to Chicago being more than just shopping. I explained that Jason and I had hired a private investigator, and that we were gathering everything we needed to file for divorce the moment we caught them red-handed. Richard didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked down, breathing deeply, his hand tightening into a fist. Then he reached over and placed a firm, fatherly hand on my shoulder. "It hurts," he said, his voice cracking. "I tried to raise them right even after their mother left. I really thought those few years they lived with me, maybe it made a difference." His eyes welled up, and before I knew it, Richard was quietly sobbing beside me. "I didn't think I could go through this kind of pain again," he said through tears. "Not from my own daughters." After a few moments, he wiped his face, straightened his back, and returned to his seat beside Lucas. I sat there in silence, staring at nothing, the weight of it all growing heavier by the minute. When we arrived at Chicago's airport, Alan Black, the private investigator, was already waiting for us. He greeted us professionally, but I could see the concern behind his eyes. He handed us 2 thick envelopes, one for Jason, one for me. Inside were dozens of photos and a DVD containing footage from the night before. He didn't need to say anything. We already knew what we were about to see. He informed us that the process server would be reaching out soon, and that one of his operatives was still monitoring the hotel rooms. His assistant would contact us the moment the situation was ripe for confrontation, when we'd catch them in the most compromising position possible. Alan added that Jake Miller and Kyle Davis's wives would be receiving identical packages around midday, making sure the fallout wasn't limited to just us. Jason and I asked Alan and Richard if they could watch the kids for a while. We needed time to absorb what we had just been handed. We opened the envelopes in private and what we saw hit us like a punch to the chest. There was Amanda caught in a series of moments I could never have imagined. Explicit, intimate, and worse, careless. One particular image made my stomach turn. She was with both men. I couldn't breathe for a second. The reality was harsher than I had braced for. Jason looked as hollow as I felt. The worst part? It appeared they hadn't used protection. Our next step, once we got back to Minneapolis, would have to include getting tested for STDs. It was humiliating. Alan stepped away to make a call to his assistant, asking if the hotel rooms were empty. Fortunately, the lovers were out having lunch. Richard went ahead and reserved 3 additional rooms under our names. Jason and I requested an extra key for rooms 2011 and 2003, rooms we had reserved earlier under our names for Amanda and Lauren. The clerk issued the keys after checking our IDs. We explained calmly that our kids had planned a surprise weekend and we didn't want to spoil it for our wives. It worked, no questions asked. All of us, including Richard, made our way up to the 3rd floor. The tension was unbearable. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. We waited. An hour passed. Then Alan called. "They just got back from lunch," he said. "And they've switched." I blinked. "Switched?" "Yeah. Amanda is now with Kyle Davis. And Lauren is with Jake Miller. They're back in the rooms. I'm in the lobby and the process server just arrived." Everything was in place. I turned off my phone, took a breath, and smiled at the kids. "All right, guys," I said cheerfully. "It's time." Lucas and Ava perked up, excited. "Remember what I told you?" I said, looking at Ava. "And you too, Lucas. Grandpa and I will go in first. And when I give you the signal, just the signal, you yell out loud, 'Surprise.' Got it?" Lucas grinned. "No problem, Dad." "And listen closely," I added, my voice more serious now. "No matter what happens, you do not enter the room until I say it's okay." Ava nodded eagerly. "We understand, Daddy. Let's go." We headed up the stairs slowly, Richard at my side, the kids trailing just behind. We stopped at room 2011. My hand shook slightly as I slipped the key card into the lock. The light turned green. I opened the door quiet as I could. Richard and I stepped inside. But the kids didn't wait. The door barely creaked open before they both shouted, "Surprise, Mom! We're here." I froze. So did Amanda. She was in bed, naked, tangled up with Kyle Davis. They were both caught completely off guard. Kyle leaped up, scrambling to throw on his clothes and get out of there. At least he moved fast, bolting for the hallway, shoes in hand. Amanda sat up, yanking the sheets over herself, panic on her face. "No, no, this can't be. What are you doing here?" she cried. Ava, completely innocent, peeked around Richard. "Hey, Mommy doesn't have any clothes on," she said, squeezing between us before I could stop her. I quickly snapped my fingers. The door opened again, and in walked the process server. He glanced around, spotted the only undressed woman in the room and asked, "Sarah Miller?" Ava, ever helpful, pointed at Amanda and said, "That's my mommy." Without hesitation, the man handed her a sealed envelope. "You've been served," he said firmly, raising his phone to snap a photo of her holding the paperwork, awkwardly trying to cover herself. Amanda was speechless. She clutched the envelope to her chest, shaking. The kids stood there wide-eyed and confused. I gently urged them out. "Let's give Mommy a minute to get dressed," I said quietly. We left her sitting there on the floor, tears pouring down her cheeks, the full reality of what just happened finally settling in. She knew what was in that envelope. She didn't even try to deny it anymore. In the hallway, Jason and his kids were waiting outside room 2003. I walked over and gave him a quick nod. "It didn't go smoothly," I told him. Kyle got out fast, but Amanda was stunned. Jason's face tightened. "What about Lauren?" I hesitated. "It got ugly." He blinked. Ugly how? Kyle, he didn't take being interrupted well. He got physical. Took a swing and actually landed it, punched Richard right in the face. Jason didn't even hesitate. His jaw clenched and he marched straight to Miller, who was still in the hallway putting on his shoes. Jason hit him. Art. It was quick, instinctive, and fueled by betrayal. Miller staggered back, blood dripping from his nose. Lauren, of all people, stepped in, not to defend her lover but to protect her father. She lashed out at Kyle, her nails digging across his cheek, drawing blood. In that moment, chaos met clarity. We weren't the villains. We weren't being irrational. We were two fathers and two husbands watching everything we built be reduced to lies. And we weren't going to let it end quietly. I stepped back into the room, fury boiling beneath the surface. Without saying another word, I grabbed Kyle Davis by the arm and dragged him toward the bathroom. I didn't want the kids to see any more than they already had. I tossed his clothes in after him and shut the door behind him. "Get dressed and get out," I said coldly. "You've done enough." Back in the bedroom, Richard, Jason, and the kids stood in stunned silence. No one tried to sugarcoat it. No shame, no pretending. Just truth. Lauren was wrapped in a blanket, her face drained of all color. Without meeting anyone's eyes, she slowly followed them into the hallway. Richard turned and looked her in the eye, calm but stern. "Go back in the room and put some clothes on," he said firmly. She didn't argue. She just nodded and walked quietly back into the bedroom like a scolded child. At that moment, the process server, who had vanished when things got loud, stepped back into the doorway. "Jessica Davis?" he asked. Lauren turned. "Yes," she said softly. He handed her an envelope. "You've been served." We all left and headed back upstairs. Originally, Jason and I had planned to stay the night, maybe talk things out with Amanda and Lauren before making any decisions. But now, I couldn't stand the idea of spending even another minute in the same building, let alone the same room as Amanda. I packed our things, called the kids into the hallway and said, "We're going home." Richard, still shaken but composed, chose to stay behind. "I have things I need to say to them," he said quietly. Jason and his kids came back with us to Minneapolis. 4 months later, the legal side of things was finalized. Amanda begged, called, emailed, even wrote letters. She apologized again and again. But by that time, a judge had reviewed all the evidence, including the footage and documentation, and granted us an uncontested divorce. I kept the house. It had been passed down from my parents long before Amanda and I ever met. I was also granted primary custody of Lucas and Ava. I didn't even ask for it. The judge simply saw that it was the best decision for their well-being. Richard made sure the kids were financially cared for too. He gifted me a generous check the following Christmas, quietly noting it came out of Amanda's future inheritance. Jason's divorce from Lauren followed a similar path. Their house was jointly owned, so it was split between them. But not long after everything was finalized, they started seeing each other again. He never said it directly, but I could tell, they're heading back toward something. Maybe even remarriage. It breaks my heart a little. Not because I envy him, but because I know that kind of forgiveness is something I'll never be capable of. As for Amanda and me, there's no going back. Part of me thinks she meant her apologies. I even believe she still loves me. But the betrayal shattered something so deep inside me that no apology could ever repair it. Whatever love I had for her died on those beaches in Biz, crushed under the weight of her choices. We're civil. We co-parent well. We're polite. But that's where it ends. One day, while she was waiting for the kids to grab their things, Amanda looked over at me and asked something unexpected. "So, how did you find out what happened in Biz?" I looked her in the eyes and said simply, "It was the tan lines." Amanda blinked, visibly confused. "What?" "I was always in a bikini. We never even went to the beach with the kids." I nodded slowly. "I know. But think about your routine. When you clean the bathroom with all those chemicals. What do you do?" She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, unsure where I was going. "I gather the supplies, put on gloves, roll up my sleeves," she started, trailing off. "You forgot one thing," I said gently. "You always took off your rings first. Both of them. Your engagement ring. Your wedding band." The silence between us was immediate, thick and oppressive, like the humidity that clings to Delhi mornings, dense, inescapable. Amanda's brow furrowed. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for a loophole, some alternate version of reality that would make it all make sense. "But I always take my rings off," she murmured, the words slow and hesitant. Her hand lifted instinctively, her gaze falling to the pale strip of skin on her ring finger, a soft white line against the golden tan of the rest of her hand. A flicker of understanding began to dawn in her expression. Then confusion. Then fear. How did you notice that?" she asked. I gave her a small, tight smile, more memory than emotion. A trace of the affection that used to live in me, long before everything had changed. "You always underestimated how closely I paid attention," I said softly. "Especially when it came to the woman I believed I knew." There was no heat in my voice. No bitterness. Just the cold truth of it. A statement of loss, plain and final. Amanda looked down again, her hand hovering over her own ringless finger, like she wanted to rewind time and fix something she now knew couldn't be fixed. That one tiny detail, so small, so meaningless to anyone else, had told me everything. It had been the first crack, the hairline fracture in her facade of innocence. Her tan skin had whispered a confession before her mouth ever opened. A quiet truth born not of words, but of the absence of a line. And I never forgot it. Before she could say anything else, the door swung open and the kids came charging in, full of laughter and chaos. Their innocent noise filled the room instantly, shattering whatever remained of our moment. They hadn't noticed the tension, the heaviness, the goodbye quietly forming between us. And that was probably for the best. Now, sometimes, when the house is still and the kids are asleep, I find myself staring at that empty spot next to me in bed. My hand reaches for nothing. Just a space. A hollow ache humming in my chest. It's not the absence of Amanda I mourn anymore. It's the version of her I once believed in. The woman who wore tan lines like truth. It wasn't Sarah I missed, not anymore. That part of me had long since withered away. What I mourned was what we had once shared, the life we built, the laughter we believed in, the promise of growing old side by side. All of it undone by a single careless act on a sunlit beach far from home. Jason, for all his anger and conviction, eventually gave in to Lauren's charm. Within 6 months of their divorce they were back together. Their relationship had always been fiery, unpredictable, and somehow they'd found comfort in that chaos. Maybe it worked for them. Maybe for some, even broken love can be stitched back together. But for me the path was different. I focused on rebuilding a life grounded in something more dependable, something real. The rage that once consumed me had cooled into a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to let this define me. I would be a steady, present father. A man my kids could count on. That became my purpose. One evening as we were winding down after dinner, Lucas caught me off guard. He was playing with one of his toys, then looked up and asked softly, "Dad, do you think Mom will ever come back?" His eyes held a fragile hope, a question far heavier than his young voice could carry. I knelt down in front of him, placed a hand gently on his shoulder, and met his gaze. "No, buddy," I said, steady but kind. "Sometimes things break, and they just can't be fixed. And that's okay. We'll still be okay." In that moment, I wasn't thinking about betrayal anymore. I was thinking about the future, for myself, for my children. A future not built on what had been lost, but on what still remained. Trust, honesty, resilience. The tan lines on Amanda's finger had long since faded. But the truth they exposed, her deception, had left a different kind of mark. One that wouldn't disappear with time. A quiet scar. A lesson etched deep into the man I had become. A love lost not just in distance but in trust. Left behind on the beaches of Biz, never to return. Dear readers, if this story resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Have you experienced something similar? How did you move forward? Drop your comments, and if you feel others could learn from this, please consider liking, sharing, or subscribing.